What's up, YouTube? I'm Robert, and this is the B1KER Bar Podcast live stream, episode 91. Today, we're going to have the founder of a Singletrack Mind on, which is a skills clinic that is run here in Northern California. But before that, we'll do the beginning of the show particulars. So first things first, if you guys haven't followed me on Instagram, please do that. I like watching the number count, like the follower count, grow. And if you're not an Instagram person, then go over to Facebook and do the same thing there. The @B1KER or B1KER B1. There's always extra pictures up there, kind of little extra things going on, talking about whenever I'm going to travel sometimes or this and that and the other. It's good stuff. And it helps the channel grow. And whenever I'm talking to different companies about sponsorships or something like that, they like to see all those numbers. And those are just as important as hitting subscribe here. If you haven't subscribed, definitely do that. And even for you podcast listeners, you can subscribe to the podcast too. I think that shows something. I don't know. I don't know anything about podcasts like statistics or the way that they're really ranked. I just know YouTube. And then I do this podcast, and somehow or another, things are coming along well. You guys that have written reviews over there, thank you very much. I haven't seen one in a while, so if you've been thinking about swinging by the Apple Podcast and writing a review, that would be rad, because those definitely do something. And the more positive reviews there are over there, the more that it comes up on a list whenever somebody's trying to look for an MTB podcast, and that helps. So if you guys really would like to help the channel out, and a guy in his mid-40s trying to quit his job, go to Patreon. You can drop $1 over there and just help out. It's like a tip jar. Or you could do $5, get a sticker pack, and then you can actually just contribute whatever you want. Like, you could do like $6.27 if you want in a month. It doesn't even matter. One way or another, that stuff does help the channel a lot. And I appreciate everybody that's over there. I've been trying to make exclusive content just for the Patreon people. So I recorded one yesterday, actually, because it's a trail system that, I don't know, people get all triggered if you make a YouTube video about it. So I made something that only people on Patreon get to see. So you have to join that $5 tier for that, though. Anyways, I'm going to move on from that. Oh, one more thing too. You know, it's been kind of sporadic the last few weeks on the podcast. Some weeks it's on, some weeks it's not. I've had like stuff where it's like, you know, the kid's graduating from high school or supposed to do this trip with the lady and this and this and this. And next weekend, I'm actually heading up the Bend. So if you guys are in the Bend area, maybe we'll see each other out on the trail. But nonetheless, I'm not going to be able to do a podcast next weekend. At least I don't think I'm going to. Maybe I could talk. I'm going to be up there hanging out with Project 321. Maybe I could talk Jake into actually getting on. That would be interesting. I'm going to take my stuff just in case. We'll see if we can talk him into it. Anyways, more than likely, probably not going to happen. So after that, though, we should be going strong. So anyways, let's go ahead and bring Dylan on here from a Singletrack Mind. How's it going, man?
Good, man. How are you today?
Sweet, dude. Just like I said a minute ago, man, just down here sweating. My studio is in the garage, which is also not air conditioned. So I need like 657 more people on Patreon before I can get air conditioning out here. So so what were you up to today?
Ran a 2-day clinic up in Truckee today. We just wrapped up 4:00. Ran out, came back here, changed it up real quick, and sat down.
So a 2-day clinic. What did you guys go over?
We went over fundamentals. So most of my clinics are running fundamental skills into progressions on second day. So starting out with what a lot of people feel like are basics. But starting out with basic body position stuff, moving into progressions of slow speed handling, things like that, conscientious braking points. And then day 2 is wheel lifts, and then moving into high speed cornering. And then getting out on the trail on both days for at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending. We spent a little less time out on trail today just so that we weren't totally sweating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you said it was 90 in Truckee. That's pretty high for a Truckee too. So
it's probably lower. That was the hood of the car, so
yeah.
But the forecast said 88.
Yeah, it's still pretty warm for up there. I know. Like I said yesterday, I was riding down in UC, and we got there and it was like 65. I was like, oh my god, this is so awesome. It was pretty warm by the end of the day, but it was not bad at all. So are all your clinics, do they range in like skill level from like the beginners, kind of what you were just talking about, or do you see like a lot of intermediate advanced people in that class that you just gave?
You see a pretty broad spectrum. Predominantly, looking at it is the average is just somebody who wants a shortcut, who doesn't want to spend 2 years trying to learn how to ride a bike. Or the average is people who've ridden 20 years and they're like, oh, coaching, I've never thought about taking a mountain bike lesson. Let's see what's going on.
I'm in that group. I should take a class. I really should. I keep telling myself I'm going to, and I'm like, I've been riding since the 90s. I don't need a class, And then one of my friends tells me something, and I'm like, holy shit, maybe I do need a class. That sounds.
Yep.
So go ahead.
It's surprising how many sort of opinions there are out there on what's supposed to be done, and how many people give you great trail tips. Oh yeah, just do this and you'll be totally fine.
Right.
So I try to demystify some of that shit, basically.
Yeah. I can imagine I wouldn't be able to handle it. Like, I know what like kind of comments and stuff I get from people on YouTube, and most of them, are 98% of them are great, and then there's like 2% of them where you're like, what, like, and so I can imagine for you, it's kind of like, here's these people paying you to come and get some clinic, and then they probably like, there's probably every once in a while some guy that's like still trying to tell you how to do it.
It's rare. I've only had a couple times, like even I've been coaching basically for 10 plus years. And so it's I've seen a fair amount of them. But I've only had one that like stuck out where I was like, well, that guy was kind of like, that was a piece of work. And he showed up and then his bike falls apart, and I was like, oh, I got to fix this. I fixed his bike, and then he's like, no, I think what you're trying to say is, and I'm like, okay. And then he's like, I want a refund, and I'm like, whatever, dude. Like, fine, I don't care. Like, I fixed your bike, and then so
that's classic. I want a refund. After he listened to everything you said.
That was when I was working 3-day camps though, so that was a lot.
So well, I don't even know like what qualifies you as an instructor, man. What's your background?
I just say I'm an instructor. No, I
don't know what do you call yourself? Not an instructor?
No, I do. It's mountain bike skills coaching. Basically a coach.
Okay.
Instructors.
I use the wrong vernacular. I'm horrible at that anyway.
It's all good. No, it's sort of the same thing. I mean, you think like ski instructors is like that's where it comes from. A tennis instructor. You know, it's rare that they're called coaches. Most of the time, a coach is like a trainer.
But I think like life coach or something. I'm like, oh man, I don't need to talk to one of those.
Totally. I started riding in '89. I grew up on mountain bikes. I bought my first mountain bike from the Cove in Sausalito. Well, actually, my parents bought it for me and put it under the tree for Christmas. And I lived on a dirt road. And just rode the bike to my buddy's house, and rode to my buddy's house, and rode to my buddy's house, wherever, and so any ride I did was a mountain bike ride because I wasn't riding on the pavement. I never grew up, in urban settings. So like all the urban stuff that came out, like BMX or flatlandy manual stuff and all that, I was like, what? Who does that? I'm a mountain biker. I don't do that. And then I realized I'm like, oh, that stuff's kind of cool. So that's sort of my progression now, is learning those things. But
right on. So just a long time of doing it.
Well, to go further, yes. If you want, I'll give you a whole history. I started racing in early 90s, probably, back in the days of cross country. I grew up racing Nordic skiing, running cross country in high school and everything. And then downhill just was getting started. And probably like 92, 93 was like my first downhill race. And that was the old Oroville downhill.
Mm-hmm.
I remember showing up in full spandex and high posting. And there was, the early downhill vibe culture there, the guys in, baggies and full faces and, full suspension bikes and things. And they're like, you got to drop your post. And I was like, why? I never drop it anyways. And I don't even remember what I placed at that point in time. I probably ate shit and fell off the course and was that bloody, on the side of the trail. But, yeah, up until 94 on and off. And then I started racing 94, doing like state championships, California state championship stuff. And then after that, like early nationals would have been like 98, 99. And I was riding a Carpiel, one of the bikes that old Jan Carpiel built in Reno.
Oh, right.
And moved to Tahoe and used to do the old downhill series up here, the North Star series and all the national stuff. So rolling into Big Bear, Deer Valley, Mammoth when they had those. Right. And then Bonner Ski Ranch, racing with like Tim Krentz and Carl Rogney, all the grommets, they're Cam Zink, Cam McCall, Tyler McCall, and all those guys were racing Junior X at that point in time.
Right.
Yeah.
Then been around for a while.
I've ridden bikes for a long time.
Yeah. It's funny what you said about, back whenever you first started. I remember I'm from Pennsylvania originally, and there's like woods everywhere, and so like even when you rode BMX, like let's just call it street, you would still be like taking these, like, for lack of a better term, and just be like shortcuts, but they would be dirt road, like dirt single track trails that like skirt through this forest, and maybe down this hill, and people would build jumps on them and stuff like that. And it was like, that's where I started, so it was like you were on a BMX bike, but we were in the dirt, like on the dirt a lot, and then somewhere along the line, my mom was dating this guy and bought me a mountain bike, and it's kind of similar. And then it's like, oh, there's this whole other like way to do it. And I would like ride with these guys that were like 35, 40 on the weekends. And then during the week, it would just be like ride around town and raising hell and knocking over trash cans and shit. Right.
Exactly what you're supposed to do, right? At that age.
Right. Yeah. So at what point did you decide you were like, I'm going to be a coach? Now I got the word right.
I raced up until Norba basically got bought out. And then I kind of backed off because racing basically went to being sucky again, and it sort of fell apart at that point. Practice time sucked, and then it kind of burned me out on the sport. And I kind of a couple years there was like out of it, and then I came back after getting married in 06, 07, and was like, riding bikes is really fun. Like I saw the World Cup in Vigo in 07, which was awesome, and then kind of got into just trying to do something different, got into wrenching professionally, took a UBI class, and then took a camp with Gene Hamilton. And the co-coach was Greg Menard. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, definitely have.
And so I was like, man, coaching would be really cool. And I kind of did it just to see like how he coached. And I was like, I'm a good rider. I've raced pro and whatever. And so I went there, and then I realized that I didn't know shit, and wished I had taken a lesson sooner so that I could have been faster earlier and safer. And then he offered me a job. Basically, he was like, I'll train you if you want to be one of my coaches. And so I took a training course from him in 2009, and then started really coaching for him like winter, like just the winter 2009 into 2010, and then worked for him up until like basically 2015.
Oh, wow.
And I got to travel all over the place coaching. I coached in Bellingham to Phoenix to Pennsylvania to Virginia, Detroit, Michigan to Austin, Texas.
Wow.
So yeah, San Diego. Yeah, pretty much all.
What was the thing? So what was the thing that really like made you decide to do that? Just taking that class the first time, or I sort of like fell in love with the process?
I kind of wanted to coach because I felt like I was never going to be I wasn't going to be a pro anymore. I wasn't going to be the king in races. And I was like, I've put a bunch of time into this. I may as well try to share it somehow. And like, it'd be cool to just do some coaching stuff and like say, here, just do that, help people get more stoke from the sport and be able to just do it more effectively.
Right.
And then when that opportunity came up, like Gene Hamilton's, one of the most, not like most, but like he's a really well-respected coach in it so far. Is like, he has a couple names like Mitch Ropoletto, Cody Kelly. Like there's some guys that he's coached that are really, really fast. So it was a cool opportunity to be able to work with him and learn that curriculum. And then I started thinking about, I want to do it myself. And so I was doing side stuff. And then effectively, Gene just got to the point where he's like, I need to just have my business. I can't run a multiple instructor and coach business, where we got a bunch of people flying all over the place and organize that. And so he kind of shrank his business. And that was right about the time where I was like, felt comfortable starting my own.
Right on.
In 2015, that winter was my first advertised camp. And then I've just been going since then. So
yeah. What was that like, taking the leap? Were you pretty confident, or were you scared? Or
it was tough. Like, I mean, I worked 2 jobs plus doing that, like I was wrenching down in the Bay a little bit. And at that point we had moved back to Tahoe. And so I was effectively just running, being a carpenter basically. And like trying to do that. And so working all week and then trying to coach when I could on the weekends, it was stressful for sure.
Yeah. It's like kind of like a side gig thing until you could like get it to a point where it was making enough to pay the bills and get rid of the other stuff. I know how that goes. Yeah. You gotta, sometimes that's the way though. I mean, and it's tough at the beginning, you're definitely, you're putting a lot of time in. You give up a lot of free time that you could be like sitting on the couch or riding your bike or hanging out with your family. And so, so now you've been at it for a while. It seems like, I mean, I went on your website, you got stuff all over the place.
Yep. Yeah.
Pretty much. It looked like you went down as far as like Mammoth I saw, and then up in the Tahoe area, some stuff in the Bay area. Do you get out of Northern California at all, or?
Not too much. I've tried to put stuff outside of it, but it's hard to, I mean, I have a small name brand right now. And so getting stuff into like Oregon and stuff like that, where you have like All Ride and all those sort of like, other businesses and things like that. But my brand's definitely getting bigger and it's definitely pushing. I've done privates and stuff in random places, but predominantly NorCal, like Redding. Redding's as far north as I'll go, Redding, Shasta, and then coming down, I've done stuff in San Diego, not as much on my own. I've put some stuff on outside of Ventura, in greater Los Angeles area. Slow. I've worked in, a lot of it is just trying to find places. Like last year was challenging at finding places for permits. Putting on events just because the minimum amount of people and stuff like that. But it was also super helpful because it got a lot of people out doing stuff. But
yeah, there's a lot more people in the sport now. So you have to get a permit for wherever you're giving your class at?
You're making money.
Yeah. Wow. That's kind of weird. I wouldn't even think about that. Like I would be like running like so illegally for so long until I got popped. Like, what do you mean a permit? I'm just fucking riding my bike, dude.
As soon as you make money, they have to make money. That's
I get it. It's just dumb. I don't know. I feel like,
how is it any different than, like one of those crazy rides that they got 30 people showing up to meet and riding through it? Like, it's not. Like, it's probably even safer because those 30 guys together are like, go, and like sending people off of jumps that they shouldn't even be doing. And you're like, oh, sorry, bro. My bad.
Right.
I'm out, so.
Right. Yeah. Like I know whenever I first started talking to Tom, the guy that runs California Expeditions, and he does that shuttling up there in Georgetown.
Yeah.
I didn't mean like, he needs like permit per weekend and how many people he has and all this and that. And it's like, if you use them all up too early in the season, then you can't have, or you didn't get enough, then like, it's just crazy. I would never, ever imagine that it was something like that, but
it's his is more difficult because of the transportation part of it. So he's running an FDA permit. So he has a food and like it's like a food and beverage. Like he's, like it's a crazy, like what he has to go through is a big hoop. And then the transportation is a whole nother piece of getting people in your car, all the certifications of vehicles, and then the trailering and all those parts is like, those are the challenges. And that's why that's why like the companies have a limit 8, this, that, and they have the scheduled times and stuff like that, where they're not just like, oh yeah, load up, we can go, so they basically put it out there that they have only a certain amount to go through. I mean, I'm a little bit softer as far as what I have to deal with. The Forest Service works really well with me, and so I'm really stoked on being able to guys. So it's a treat.
So do you have to? I would imagine you have to carry some kind of insurance too, like So how much insurance do you have to carry to like make sure somebody's not like? I don't even know what the insurance is for. Just if somebody decides to sue you, or like if they get hurt or something. Yeah,
injury loss stuff. It depends on who you're working through. Like working with some parks, they require like $4 million. But it's surprisingly not that expensive to get the policies. Like those bigger policies are definitely a little bit more. And I basically, once I see that, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that. But most are like, dude, it's really reasonable. It's not like,
I was thinking about trying to build this bigger event. I used to do these smaller ones, and I was trying to think about like ramping it up, and that insurance thing was one of the things I was like, I don't know, is that going to be expensive or what?
Yeah.
But I think some of them you can get just for like a short period of time though, too. It's not like you have to like get the insurance for the whole year. Like you can be like, I need it for a week, or whatever it is.
You basically buy it for, the time leading up to it, set up, and then take down.
Yeah.
And you're covered through that. And I don't really know much about that, but there's great insurance companies out there. We use McKay. So they're nice. They do a bunch of sports stuff. So
then I would imagine you operate under like an LLC or something like that as well. That way somebody can't try to come take your house or something like that, right?
And the protection is, it's, I don't know, it's kind of like, yes, it's there, but it's not like fail safe, I guess.
Yeah. I've heard that about like, what are those, the waivers that people sign too? Like it maybe keeps some people honest, but for like, they don't ever really hold up if you were in court or something like that. I don't know.
They do and they don't. I mean, it
depends on the judge that day.
Yeah, it depends on how uptight people are. But anyways, but I wound up early on coaching high school mountain biking also. And so right on. I did NICA in 2011, 10, 11, I think was my first year. So right when I first started getting into coaching, and I was working for Marin Catholic down in Marin County. And so I coached those guys for 2 years as their head coach. And we wound up getting, as a small team, we wound up being in Division 1 instead of Division 2, which is like anything over like 20 people. And so we were racing against Redwood and Drake, which had like 60 to 90 man squads. And we got to go in, and our second year working with them, we got third with that squad up against Drake and Redwood. And we actually would have gotten second if I hadn't had one kid have a mechanical, and we would have been second place in the state. So
oh wow, that's awesome, dude.
Yeah,
I mean, that's got to make you feel good as well, because I mean, that's something that, I mean, you train the kids, so
yep. No, it was really cool. I had a couple sleepers that were trained by an elite trainer that definitely put in a lot of work on the team. So it wasn't totally me, but I got to bring all the other team up there to get the points. So it was definitely fun. And so now I still work with NICA doing a lot of their, well, not NICA really, but NorCal League as one of their coach trainers. So I do a lot of the skills coach training for their certification so that they can get their coach levels brought up. So that's a big thing that I try to do now still.
So is all the coaching you do the classes, or do you have like an individual thing that you'll do with people as well, like a different rate for that, or do you just stick with classes?
No, so I do schedule classes on weekends just because that's usually when people can go through. And then I'll usually be piggybacking on either side of it on Friday or Saturday, depending where I'm at, trying to do privates in there. So
how long does a private lesson last?
Long as you want. I'll do packages. I'll do 10-pack bundles. So you can buy 10 hours for 8. What is it now? 8.15. I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, we just changed
it's on the website.
Yeah.
Ask my accountant.
Yeah. Exactly. Where is it? Click here.
Right.
But yeah, basically a private is 200 for the first 215 for the first 2 hours, and then 85 an hour after that.
Right.
So I can't, like, some people are like, I just want an hour. It's like, you can't really do anything in an hour, right?
Yeah.
There's not enough time to actually validate or correct anything at that point. And then I'll do group privates and then semi-privates also, which is like 2-to-1.
So the private one, what was that? I missed what you just said there.
Oh no, I thought we were having audio issue. We had
maybe it blinked out for a second. I was typing to the people in the comments at the same time I was listening to you. So over here multitasking.
Yeah. No, I was saying I do group privates, which is basically a day rate, but you have to organize your own thing. And then I'll do team rate stuff. Which gets a small discount. So like I've worked with Roaring Mouse for years now. And then I've worked with colleges before, Stanford, UC St.
Wow. So when you do the individual one, like, what do you recommend somebody to start out with? Like 3 hours or something? Like, is that like a good baseline? Or, I mean, obviously you're like 300 hours.
No, yeah, more the better.
Right.
I think 3 hours is good. Like if you're like a solid rider, like 3 hours is a good investment. I can basically run through what I call my fundamentals with one rider in about an hour to hour and a half of just like, here's these 7 base movements that you need to be able to think about and do on a bike. And then from there, we can kind of branch out into whatever problem I saw or whatever their progression wants to be of.
So you kind of go on like a little tiny ride or something like that, so you can kind of see what they're doing, or you just like, how do you like?
I just run through the parking lot.
Just watching somebody pedal, and you can be like, oh, I can see what's going on here already.
Yeah, I basically just make them go through set movements. Like the simplest thing is you like if you have basically 7 things you need to be able to do on a bike and have the bike be controlled. You need to be able to move up and down. You need to be able to move forward and backwards. You need to be able to move side to side. And then you need to be able to control pressure while you're doing that. And then it seems super stupid and super simple, but you need to know how to steer. And most people get kind of lost with their steering control and how hand movements and bar movements change what's going on. If you think every activity we do, how many of the activities you do in daily life is your balance controlled by your hands?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about.
Nothing.
Right?
And so all of your balance on mountain biking is basically, there's small hip, knee, and other little things, but a lot of the movement comes from what your hands are doing. And if you have the wrong weight in your hands at the wrong point in time, you're going to hit the dirt.
Yeah, definitely. I do so much that I don't know, that I don't think about. I've been riding since, I was a kid, and I mean, not professionally as a racer or anything, but I've done a lot of riding, and I'm just not one of those people that can articulate things. But whenever I listen to other people give like training, I'm always like, oh yeah, I do that. Like I'll watch somebody's like how to jump video, and I'm like, I didn't even think about my feet are doing that. Or, oh yeah, I do throw my weight like that. I totally freaking no clue what I'm doing. I just do it. Which is like, I make the worst like coach for any of the ladies that I've dated, or like my lady I'm with now. She's like, how do you do this? And I'm like, I don't know. You just send it, like,
yeah. That's that. Yeah. Just point it.
Yeah. Just point it over that way,
Yeah.
Feather your brakes. You're good. They're like, what do you mean feather? And I'm like,
like tickle, like
yeah, right. Yeah.
Think of dimmering. Dimmering's a great one. That's a good way to describe it.
Oh, okay. There you
Like
go.
you're dimmering the switch.
Yeah, yeah. It took me a second, but I got what you were saying there. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. It totally
It's
makes
not
sense.
a word. Don't worry, dimmering's not a word. It's
I'm in, dude.
right.
So,
I'm
you
gonna give you a piece of advice right now. So think about what you're doing. Don't think about it. Just feel what you're doing. Right. Go through it. Go for a ride, and like if you're having fun, like going out, whatever. But if you just go for a ride solo and you're sort of in like that Zen state, like just feel what's going on. Feel where you're moving.
Yeah.
And be aware of it, and you'll be like, aha, I got it. Right. Like that feel is a big piece.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really, really difficult for me to like, I don't know. I just don't think about it. I think that's what it really is. I don't think about it when I'm writing. And so then when somebody's asking me or I'm trying to explain it, I'm like, I don't know. She was telling me, my lady one, you know, the girls that run MTP Experience?
Yep.
She went to one of their clinics because apparently I'm not a good coach. So
it's safer for the relationship to keep that.
Yeah, I thought so too. I was like, this is a good idea. And so she went there and she was saying that the coach that she was working with was saying, instead of dropping both of your heels on the pedals, to like kind of wedge in instead. So like 1 foot up and 1 foot down. And like at first when she said it to me, I was like, wow, I've never even thought of that. Yeah. And then like a couple days later, I was riding and I was like doing something. I was like, dude, my feet are totally like that right now. Yep. Like I'm not even like, I thought it was like like something I've never heard before in my entire life. Like,
it's a natural movement. You're standing on basically 2 spindles, and your feet are at different points, and you lower yourself down. They're basically that as it goes through. So your forward foot, I'm mixed up in this mirror.
Yeah, don't worry about it. There's people listening, so they can't see your hands anyway. So
So you're dealing with the forward foot here and the back foot here. You're as you go through, they rotate around. The deeper you get, the more wedge you naturally get into it. Yeah. Because of where the position is. So you naturally drop your front heel and you naturally point your back foot. It's helpful for a lot of people to be aware of that in the beginning. Just because they wind up shifting their feet around and they're standing on their toes and all their weights move forward, or they're dropping their heels and they're pulling off the back of the bike. And that neutral balanced body position that everyone tries to get you in is naturally that wedge position. If you're riding in balance, your feet cannot move out of that position. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I noticed it most, like once I started thinking about it, once she said that, I noticed it most where like, you're just kind of trying to get low into the bike so that you're, being able to kind of throw it around or whatever. And you can't do that with your heels dropped, and I had, I rode BMX, like I said, a lot when I was younger, and that was, all flat pedals. But whenever I got into riding mountain bikes in the early 90s, it was toe clips back then. And then later it was, whatever it is now, clipless now. Right. And, I rode that way with clips for years and years and years. And it was only like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, that I bought a hardtail again. And I was like, all these people keep talking about flats, and I used to ride BMX, so I rode flats all the time. I'm going to try it again and see like how I feel about it. And it was definitely a learning experience for me to like, obviously enough time had gone by. It'd been like, almost 20 years I've been on them. And I was listening to all those guys that were like, you have to drop your heels. You have to drop your heels. So I was like trying to do that all the time. And man, it was like affecting like my calves, like making my calves feel like overstretched, or like sometimes the front of my foot where it was feeling like it was too jammed, or something. And it definitely took a while to like learn that all that movement back. But overall, I will say, and I would have never thought I got to this point, but I tell people to go to flats all the time now, because I realized when I did that I developed a lot of bad habits over the years of not being on flat pedals.
Yeah. And you adapted to a shitty foot position too.
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
I believe it.
So like our old, like when I mean, I have a pair of 737s in the cabinet. I just saved just because like, I'm like, I have the first clipless pedal. I'm going to keep that, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, everyone was trying to move the cleat further forward. So like ball of the foot or like everything was in front of the pedal spindle, and it forces you to stand on your toes. And so like when you're talking about it right there about feeling like pressure in the feet, like you were probably super toe heavy on your flats originally. Do you use the I forget what James's pedals, but do you ride the pedal whatever pedal?
Pedaling Innovations.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
Is
do.
that flat? Yeah. So those are awesome because it promotes midfoot pedaling, and
Yeah.
I mean that's the biggest thing for me is people come off of clips onto flats and they're always trying to clip in,
Yeah.
and it's they're just going nose, they're too toe heavy, and their ball of their foot sitting right at the axle, and it's right at the flex point, and the spindle of the pedal is trying to rotate back and forth, and so it kicks your foot, and now you're standing on your toe, and they're like, I keep washing off my pedal. And so it's mainly because you're right at the fulcrum, right at the bend point of the foot and the fulcrum of the pedal, and it's washing out and softening out from underneath you, and you're just pushing through the pedal instead of standing on top of it. And so with like pedaling innovations, right? Is that the right?
Yeah, pedaling innovations.
So like James talks about midfoot, it's about supporting the foot, and you can't support the foot if you're at a flex point. And so you have to be in front of that going through. I ride way too far forward for most people. I'm, the ball of my foot is roughly at the front of my pedal. Like I'm probably 1.5 to 2 inches in front of my axle. I've adapted to that. I started riding flats in 2002 because people were like, you can't do that with clipless. And I was like, whatever. You can't ride that bike here. It's not an XC bike. We're going on an XC ride. I'm like, I'm going to ride my 6-inch trail bike here. I didn't even call it a trail bike. It was just a bike at that point in time.
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm going to ride my Super T with 170 and 160 on this trail, and I'm going to have fun. Yeah, it's an XC ride, whatever. I'm going to wait for you at the bottom on the downhill.
Right.
And I mean, I got heckled a lot.
Oh, I'm sure back then.
Early 2000s on a long travel bike. They're like, you ride. I'm like, I know.
I remember
I know my rim width's too wide.
Yeah.
You're good.
I bought a 5-inch bike in like 2005, and people were like, like they just like, that's so much suspension. What are you gonna do? Like 8-foot drops or something? And I was like, I don't know, man. I just like, okay. And like, that bike was great.
Yeah.
I had one of my fastest times in Downieville on that bike for a long time. I couldn't even catch it, and yeah, it's funny that you say that. What was I going to say about the pedals? Oh, yeah, the thing that I did too whenever I went back, like before I started using James's pedals, I'm a trust that you got his name right because I'm so bad with names, but
James Wilson.
Yeah, thank you. I went out and bought a regular pair of pedals first because I was like, I don't have any point of reference to whether or not these pedals are going to be good. So if I just started with them, then I would just be like, oh yeah, they're great, but I wouldn't know why. So I rode like a pair of 1-ups for like 6 months before I tried these. And when I first tried them, I didn't really notice it. I was like, yeah, I felt it actually climbing, and that was about it. And then something happened to my bike that had the regular, because I had one set on one bike and then his on the other bike. And I didn't ride the bike with the other pedals for like a month. And then the first time I got back on that after riding these straight for a month, it was like, I am never riding any other flat pedals than these for like the rest of my life, or unless somebody comes up with something else better.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Do you ride them as well, or you like different pedals, or?
I don't ride those. I actually do ride the 1-ups.
Yeah.
I'm sort of an ambassador for them, and they're a good pedal. I like the shape. I started off, I mean, I've ridden a bunch of them. I don't even remember what I was riding with back in the day when I was riding flats. Like, I had the Cranks Brothers for a while. Those like multiple pieces where you could like switch colors around on them. Those pedals horrible. But it was all, I didn't know any better. I was like, oh, great, these are fine.
Right.
I ran Canfield for a long time. The crampon, that pedal was really, really nice. Super slim profile.
Yeah.
You know, where you'd run that slim profile. So all together you were getting lower. Even if you were running a shorter crank, because the pedal wasn't as big, you were still getting, you know, good leverage and pedal clearance and stuff like that through there, which was really nice. I try to run super narrow. I don't really notice, like, I get on stuff and like I'll feel it here and there, but I don't get super finicky with stuff. I don't really notice it.
Yeah. I think for me, whenever when I had that break, what I really noticed, and I don't know, I have like a size 12 foot. I don't know where you're at, but for me, I really noticed when I went back to the regular flats that I just felt like my toes were like curling over and it just wasn't as comfortable. Yeah. And that's what changed it for me. And I don't know if that's just me like buying the marketing or what, but it seems like it feels good to me. And I feel like the grip is really, really great. Like it's like solid through my whole foot, you know?
Yeah.
So
I'm an average white 9.5.
Yeah.
You know, like any demo shoe, I'm like, sweet.
Right.
And, perfect. I recommend anyone with bigger feet that they run the Pedaling Innovations for sure. I worked with him who had to get custom shoes because every shoe is always too big for him. And he was like 13s or 14 pluses. Like he was massive. Like the foot's like.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Yeah.
And even when he was on that pedal, it looked like a little lollipop still. Like his foot would just dwarf it. But yeah, if you're too far, you get that like ape instinct and you start like trying to claw with your toes because they're hanging over too far.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a total valid, you know.
Well, I just noticed like the arches of my feet would be like really kind of like sore, you know, through the ride. And so I don't know. Works for me. I'm definitely I'm like, I guess, an ambassador for him as well. So if anybody wants to buy some, I'll put a link in the show more. You guys can contribute to the channel that way. I really like the pedals a lot. Definitely. Everybody was always like, they look at the size of them. They're like, oh, you're going to so many rock strikes. And I'm like, dude, I bang my feet and my bike on rocks all the time. It has nothing to do with the pedals.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The noticeable is with the width. Sometimes people that come from clips wind up pedal, you know, more just because they're not used to the overall, the width of the pedal, not really the overall length or depth. Used to having something that far out with a shoe, and you get kind of in the habit of going through it. James was actually in my first training class.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, we got trained together side by side.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I had him on the podcast. I don't know. It's probably a year ago at this point. It was a while back that we talked, and he's got a lot of knowledge, that's for sure. So,
yeah. He's a smart dude. Strong.
Yeah, he is definitely made me think about stuff that I never really thought about while we had the conversation, you know, and like I'm going to use the wrong word, like kinematics of like how your body moves and stuff like that. And I was like, oh wow, makes sense. So
study kinematics is basically correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Kinesiology, that's it.
Kinesiology, yeah.
Yeah. One of these days, I'll brush up on the English language. You drinking a beer over there?
Damn, yes.
What do you got?
A Num Num Juice, Falls River.
Oh, that is a good one. Now you're gonna make me get a beer. I'm gonna ask you a question, then I'm gonna grab a beer. What was I gonna ask you? So after the first hour and a half, you said you kind of do the basics, and then basically what would you do in the next? So you do the whole 3 hours all at once, I'm assuming is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And so you do that first part, kind of get through the basics, those 7 movements, and then you kind of, where would you go from there?
Depends on what their hiccups are, where their stall is, what effectively they would be a recommendation of working on, or if they have a specific that's in a skill spectrum of what they're capable of doing. We work it out. You know,
so if they're on their like 5th time riding a mountain bike and they're like, okay, now I want to do 10-foot drops, you're like, we're not doing that, dude.
Let's back up a little bit.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, and that's a lot of it. It's amazing is there's a lot of simple movements that just kind of go by the wayside with people, and there's a lot of Facebook chat group forums that have a lot of people who feel their opinion is a valid argument.
Yeah, I know those guys.
And it's kind of hard to battle through stuff, like there's good information out there, but a lot of times the information you're receiving at those points is they're available for personal interpretation, and going through that is watching or seeing it is they hear something and they're like, oh, this is what they mean by that, and they wind up doing something that's correct as far as their interpretation of it, but might not be actually correct as far as the actual action of what it needs to be.
Yeah, I see what you're saying there. So when you're doing that thing up in Truckee, do you go like to the Truckee Bike Park and work with people there, or do you guys go out to a ride somewhere? Like,
there's a local OHV park that accesses a bunch of variations of trails, parking lot with restrooms and things like that. Low distraction usually, where there's not a bunch of guys riding by with cool bikes and kids, falling and bleeding on the ground and screaming for their parents and stuff like that. Yeah. So it's a better learning environment. That sort of, those events don't really lead to people feeling too inspired to do things sometimes. Or too distracted to pay attention. But I try to keep it super mellow at first, because you're thinking about stuff. You're thinking about what's going on. It's like you may have never actually thought about what your foot position was. If you had to wedge and you go, oh, whoa, I have to wedge. And then if you're riding down a trail you're usually comfortable with, then you're thinking about something and your reactions are a little bit delayed, instead of it being that subconscious, proactive movement, and you wind up being in a conscious reactive movement, and things get held up or delayed, and then you're caught in a situation where stuff's going crooked. So
so what because I was thinking, man, I don't know, somewhere like Jackass would probably be like good to like show people stuff, because it's such a short loop and it's got, some rock rolls on it that were better before they were sanitized, but I won't get into that. And then,
let's not bring opinions into this one. We'll
but no, just but I mean, it's got good berms and stuff like that, so that's definitely a good place to go. Where do you see that most people struggle? You said earlier was just steering alone, or is there other like maybe the top? What are like the top 5 things or 3 things that really like jump out to you that people are usually really need more help with?
Side to side bike body separation, maintaining slow speed, track stands to ratchets to slow speed maneuvering. Side to side leads into high speed cornering, which is a big one. And then weight transfer, being able to push a bike, like being able to load the bike. So effectively, you can think of like a compression, like compression being pushing the bike. There's 2 different like waveforms or directions with it. And so like a quick compression would be like what most people call a stomp. And then like the opposite side of it would be like a load, where you're pushing back and like trying to hold through something. So if you think like a G out, you don't want to allow yourself to like get like squashed in the G out. You want to be able to like push through it to support yourself. Right. What you're doing with your legs is a load, and you'll see people get like caught in G outs with that, or the progressions of pumping and jumping all come from that load also. But the movement isn't always driven from where it should be, and people wind up adding extra movements in there. And I think that's probably the biggest. But yeah, side to side's a big one, is that maintenance of balance, of being able to stabilize left and right and not have like some odd move to try to counter through, because it's just not natural for most people to stand on something and balance above it and have it move underneath them to create stability. People want to move their body to create balance, and you can't move your body around.
I was just having a conversation with my buddy yesterday about that, and I was saying, like when I really feel dialed, when I feel like I really pinned something, it's usually like I went through some crazy chunky spot and it feels like my body is just like completely at the exact same spot, and my bike's just all over the place. You know, it's like up here, over there, there, you know, and it's just like, it's doing everything underneath me, and I'm just like floating, you know, and that's whenever you get done with the trail and you're like, dude, that was sick. I don't know if that's right or not. You know, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. Okay. Like if you think of it as like your body should be like a marionette. Like you should think about like if you were like controlling it like as a marionette up there, and you had the little figure standing below it, you'd be like holding and carrying the marionette across it, and like the bike would be just moving under, and his arms would just be like whatever, and his body would still be in the same spot, and they would just be all sort of floating and waving through it. Like you wouldn't have that you wouldn't have that feedback into the body. And that's effectively the biggest thing, is you're just trying to isolate outside feedback and keep your core as quiet as possible so that you can drive from it. If you start getting your core shifted or driven around or pushed around unexpectedly, then that's where things can go south.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I would feel that. And I mean, that's usually where I'm fucking up, if I'm on some steep, rocky descent, and that's where I mess up, because my body is not in the right spot, and you compress the fork and you are not in a position that you can recover from that.
Yep.
You know, and if my body was in the right spot, more than likely the fork wouldn't have compressed, or if it did, I would have been able to adjust and like come out of it. But instead, I don't know, maybe I think that comes with like being scared. You know, so when you're scared, at least for me, because I come from back in the day when everybody was just like, get your butt behind your tire, you know? So like when I get freaked out, I'm like getting way back, and then I'm not like weighting my bike right, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know exactly what you're doing wrong. That's awesome.
Yeah. But, you know, I've been doing it for I know myself well. I can't like do anything for anybody else, you know?
That's what I'm here for, right?
Right. Yeah.
You just got to get more people hooked on the sport, and then I'll just get more people hooked on the sport, and then we'll both be getting more people hooked on the sport together. Right.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think another thing too that has a lot to do with, because my riding has changed a lot in the last year, but I've also lost a lot of weight in this last year. And I think that level of fitness that you have in your core definitely determines a lot of how well you're riding. And I would have loved to have argued with that, you know, a year ago when I was 60 pounds heavier than I am right now, and told you that didn't matter, but it's really relevant to me now. Like I notice it, where it's like, I didn't have the energy to throw my bike around the way that I do now, you know, like the way that, I don't know how to explain the movement, but in certain, like, I'll take a swing at it. Like say you're climbing and you have to like lift your front wheel and push the bike forward over something, and then, you know, like your body English in it, you know, over this little rock or something, you know. And before, it would have been just like try to like smash the pedals enough to like do that, you know, and that takes a lot more energy, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes like a weight rep count, right? I mean, the more weight you're pushing, the harder it is, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, you were sort of adapted to that, but it also is that if you're pushing more, the larger the rep is, the harder it is to do. And that's what people is, they'll pedal high gears, and it's like, I'm getting tired, and it's like, well, spin that thing up, like more reps, lighter weight, and it's in a point of efficiency too, is that the more natural the movements are, then the less extra effort you're pushing to get into it. And like, if you coordinate those basic fundamentals, a lot of stuff builds off that. And if you're using an extra hip movement in a movement of trying to push the bike forward that doesn't need to be there, then you're wasting energy. And if you're doing that several times over a ride, where you're shifting a hip position or trying to push somewhere else to get through it, then you're effectively shooting yourself in the foot, because you did 3 moves that only needed to be 1 move. Mm-hmm. You know, or the same as like where people look at a little rock and they're like, oh, I'll go around it. And you go around a little rock to avoid going over it 6 to 10 times. Now you've added 30 feet to the trail. And if you keep doing that the whole trail, then you're at 500, 600 feet. You know, I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but also each of those movements requires more energy to coordinate, you know, to physically think about and move through.
I've had a few people that I've helped get into the sport over the last year, and it's really hard to get people to understand that you like just run into this shit. Like the suspension will do it. And I usually try to have people back at the house before they even start riding, like run straight into this curb. Like I really just run straight into it and see that your fork is just going to eat it up.
Yeah.
And usually that helps a lot of people if you can actually get them to do it, though. A lot of times they'll get right to it and then they still like pull up, and it's like, no, I'm telling you, just run into it. Like,
yeah, especially with Niners. Like we used to do that, you know, back in the day when we were on 26-inch. Back in the day. Yeah. But yeah, you'd go into it and you'd be talking to somebody, and like when Gene and I would go through, it'd be like you'd have your hand off the handlebar and be like looking not even at the curb and like talking to them and just smash into the thing, and they're like, oh my God, and you're like, it's not a big deal, like, but a curb is basically the largest small obstacle you can roll over without like having to do something. Like you can basically just hit it and absorb through it because it's hitting low in the radius of the wheel, and so where the force is, there's enough of the wheel forward of the curb that it's still rolling forward. If you hit it far enough back and you're close to actual end apex of it, that's where stuff gets crazy. And the thing is that most of the impacts, even if you're looking at like some crazy rock on the trail, your actual point of impact for the tire is usually smaller than a curb, and you're going to roll up onto it. But people see like a 16, 18-inch tall rock and they're like, oh my God, that's massive. But unless it's a vertical edge, most of the time when you impact it, it's going to be low enough that the first impact is technically a curb. You just have to allow movement to let the bike come up and go over it.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I guess the reason I try to show people that is then I tell them then when we're on the trail, like, look, is that rock sticking out of the ground more than the curb? No. Roll into it. Like, just roll over the damn thing. Like, it's like, you'll be surprised how much easier this ride gets when you're not doing exactly what you said, like just around and around and around. And you figure out that you're like, that's what's making you slow, you know, like.
I mean, it's effectively micromanaging where you go through it and you're just like trying to like pick this line, pick that line, knife back and forth and go through stuff. And there's points of managing things, but you want to make sure is that you're taking the most efficient line as you can, and that you're going to go through stuff. If there's a small rock at the beginning, you want to roll over that small rock to go through it. If you try to avoid three of them, most people forget that they have a trailer behind them, that there's a rear wheel, and they turn through it, and then all of a sudden the rear wheel hits something that they didn't expect, and then they get bucked, and then they panic, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't know that was there. And it's like, if you had just gone straight, you would have seen the rock and known that you were going to hit something and been ready for it, instead of trying to like knife through it. And that's where people get caught too, is that in that micromanagement of the trail is now they're changing directions and their steering control might be off, and they don't expect for the turn to be as tight, and then all of a sudden the bars move out of their hands quicker than they expect, and then they overcompensate to go backwards, and then they turn before they expect to go through. And so that steering control is a huge piece to that, is that there's certain times where I want to kind of weave through stuff and create this path, but you have to be aware of what's the drawback for doing that, or what's the gain? What are you trying to get from it, or what are you losing by doing it? And that's the battle with mountain biking, is there's a lot of gain loss, you know, movements out there of this is going to benefit me how, or is it not going to benefit me? So
yeah. Do you talk to people about like pumping or anything like that, or
it comes up? Pumping's a confusing one as far as what your actual, like where the movement's coming from and the timing and things like that. And it changes with bikes, it changes with terrain and all those pieces in there. Pumping comes into that conversation about load, where your load is and how you're pushing the bike going through it. So an extension of that compression sort of skill. That compression is something I talk about as a skill. But the load that's necessary to create pumping is really hard to create on most trail systems if they don't have like a really nice roller or something where people can actually work through the feeling of a true pump track.
Yeah.
Because the timing's really hard to schedule if it's awkward, if it's a natural feature. And that's a problem for sure for a lot.
Yeah, I've been trying to explain it to my lady lately, and I think she kind of got it. I forget what trail we were on, but it took a certain trail that was pretty close to a pump track where I was like, you know, as you're coming over this, push down, and because I was trying to tell her how to get speed without pedaling.
Yep.
You know, and it was definitely one of those things that I think a lot of people don't do, you know. At least I don't notice it. You know, you can usually tell, like, because I'll end up doing it even in like rock gardens and stuff where it's like I'm just trying to get a little speed and I don't have time to fucking pedal, right? So I'm like, or using this little section, you know, and just pushing it down, you know.
Yeah. Or using it as a weight and unweight, where you push into something and then you unload off the next one and you float over a little rock and then push into the next one through it. So the load, I mean, as I said, that's one of the main skills is that compression, either quick spikes where it's a stomp or that long pressure where it's a load. I think the most confusing thing for most people with pumping is the point of actual pressure. And a lot of people feel like the pump should come from the top of a said roller and you should be pushing down to go through it. If you're only pushing a little bit down a slope, there's not a big push. And if you do get enough pressure going down it, the hardest part is that curve or that transition of what you're pushing up into. So even if I get enough speed to push down through it, I would need to have the speed to push out of it instead. So I'm not gaining anything from pushing into a transition because I still have to be able to absorb that transition. I'm trying to push.
Kind of pushing like right at the G out kind of spot.
Exactly. So it's where the bike's actually shape changing. So where it's going from downslope, front wheels transitioning into either the upslope of the next roller, or it's progressing out into the flat if you're coming off of a flat. But it's that punch of the rear wheel going down. And a lot of people will use arm pressure to push the bike down. Your arms and upper body need to stay super quiet. And the legs themselves is that drive, that extension, which is effectively the load into the rear wheel, is what's driving the wheels or wheel down and then driving the bike forward together. And it's that transition that you're trying to pump out of. You're not trying to pump into that. You're trying to push out of the transition into the next step. So if you thought about like a curve, you're just thinking is that it's actually in that point of change in the shape of the bike or in the shape of the curve. It's not into the shape of the curve. You're not rolling over the top and pushing down the ramp to go into the curve. You're pushing through the curve at the bottom. And a lot of people will talk about trying to get back at that point. The reason it looks like you're back is because the bike has been angled into a new slope or a new position. And so visually, with a tilt of the bike, handlebars have rolled away, the rear tire is rotated up closer to your butt, and it looks like you're back. You're still just trying to push down, but you're allowing the bike to shift into a new shape going through it.
Yeah. My lady asked me, and I had a really hard time explaining this. I'd be interested to hear how you say it. She said, people keep telling me to get light on the pedals. She's like, what does that mean? And I really struggled to articulate what that meant without I'm like in my head, I know what it means. Like I know what it means when I'm riding, but like, how do I explain that to her?
I wouldn't. I would never tell somebody to get light in the pedals. I would never say get light in the pedals. You want to allow for movement, but I want to keep constant pressure. And the way I would say you would think about getting light in the pedals is that it feels as if you're because like if I feel like getting light in the pedals, I feel like there's separation and that like
and I don't think that's what they're explaining. I think when somebody says that, and this is just my assumption.
Yeah.
But I think it's like when you're not trying to like jam the bike into the ground. So you're letting it like come up as you're going over that rock and you're still keeping planted, but you're not trying to like push it down. That's the best way that I could explain it. But I think maybe lighten your pedals is probably the wrong thing to say because it does lead to making people think of what you're saying, where you're actually like kind of lifting your feet off of them.
So if you think of it as what at that point, if it's pressure through the feet alone, you're softening them. So your knees would be going soft. And so you're trying to allow for effectively movement of the bike upwards. And so the first hinge would be at your knees. It moves into what would be, I mean, most people call it a hinge effectively. It's that ability to let the hips drop back and allow the legs to come up in balance. It's the opposite of the compression. So that compression or load and that stomp, that spike as that stomp of the bike getting driven down. In the reverse aspect of it, it's the bike getting driven up. So it's basically a negative of a spike. And so it's a return. And if you can allow for the bike to move in the same path opposite, then you don't have to truthfully unweight. You just have to not allow for the transfer of energy to affect your core and lift you up. And so you're trying to dissipate whatever that is, whatever frequency is coming at you, by a softening of the knees and a hinge at the hips to allow for it to move up or back towards you. So if you think of that, if you were to think of like a body position as like a tall position or a low position, there's a lot of riders which talk about, like, if you classified how you ride a bike, what would you say, what was your position as far as being in a bike?
Me personally?
Yeah. Like if you called your average position, do you feel like you move around a bunch, or do you feel like you ride in a position?
I move around a lot.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't, I'm all over the place. Cause even like climbing, like sometimes I'm sitting up straight because I need to like unload my back some, you know,
chest and get some air in the lungs.
Yeah. Yeah. And then sometimes I'm freaking, bent over in like almost an attack position because I'm trying to, lift up over something so I'm kind of definitely all over the place. I don't like have a rigid position, but I think that's because I'm super comfortable on my bike. Yeah. And I think that when people start, they're definitely like, it takes a long time to get comfortable with your bike now.
So people will go in and they'll hear attack position and they'll be like, okay, somebody said I have to ride in this position, and they'll hold that position all the time and they won't allow for adjustment. So if you thought about, if you're coming into it where you're opening up, you're standing up, you're getting taller, where you come off of a super gnarly trail and it rolls into like what we would feel like is a mellow section of single track or onto a fire road like that, you'd stand up, right?
Totally. Like stretch out my legs. I'm like, fuck, man, I'm tired.
Exactly. And then as it got more rockier, or you went into a section where you needed to do something, you would move into a lower position, right?
Yeah.
So there's ranges of motion in there. And so if you think of it as far as range of motion goes, you have what would be a tall position, which is effectively is as tall as you can stand on the bike, but still have a little bend to your knees, elbows, and hips where you're not going locked out. And then your low position. And the low position is as far as you can get into the bike, as low as you can get.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that movement of moving up and down is a negative, is how tall can you stay, but have the bike move up towards you to create that low body position. So it's not always about your body moving up and down. It can be the bike moving up into you instead of your body moving down. So
yeah, I always call that like using your natural suspension. Like you have a lot of suspension in your legs, and then your bike has a little tiny bit, so you need to use the suspension that your body gave you. Like, because if you don't, and you just rely on the bike, you're gonna not be able to absorb much. You know?
The bike is for high frequency stuff that you can't take feedback from, right? So your body has whatever, like a smaller rider is going to have, unfortunately, less suspension. Naturally, a smaller rider is going to have a lot more suspension because they have more range and movement. And so my biggest thing is with riding is riders lock themselves out and they lose range of movement, and that's where they get stuck, is they don't have ability to react to something or move in that sensation. So as you said about the suspension, what the way you worded that would be the better way to talk about being light on your feet, is that you're trying not to allow feedback to move through it. If you're on something and you're thinking about your feet staying light, your feet are staying the same. So you don't want to have an increase in pressure in your feet. If you're heavy in your feet and you're smashing into something, then because of that impact from the bike and the bikes want to return or move upwards, that upwards movement is now adding force to your effective pedal pressure. And so your feet are getting heavier because your weight combination of you moving down and the bike moving up is spiking it. And so If you're light and can absorb that impact, then that absorption creates a neutral pressure in your feet instead of it spiking going through it.
Yeah.
And so light pedals in my mind would be reduction of a spike in pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not increasing weight, that you're keeping or maintaining a similar amount of weight through the system.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. It's definitely interesting to think about. And like when you break the stuff down, there's a lot going on that you don't think about, or at least, and I guess this kind of comes back to my personal inability to articulate things.
It's most people.
Yeah.
Most people don't think about what's going on, and they don't feel what's going on.
Yeah.
And then they go through and they work off of an interpretation of what somebody told them in that situation. Yeah. So I finish.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, there's just so much that I don't think about, and because I've been riding for so long, and whenever we have conversations like this, it always makes me realize like why it's so intimidating to new riders, because there's so much to think about, it's like not even like where their body is, like, how do I pull these brakes? Do I change gears? Like, I feel like the dropper post is great for people that have like learned how to ride. But for people that are just learning how to ride, it's like, fuck, now there's another thing that you got to pay attention to, and like, and I could see that frustration in some of these people that I've helped, kind of get into the sport this year. And it's tough to like not sound like you're giving them a list of like 75 things to think about whenever they're starting out. Do you have a way that you break it down for like newer riders, or?
I mean, it basically is just trying to go through those simple ones.
Well, you said the 7 movements though too. That probably covers a lot of it, huh?
That's your basic, like that's your basic movements. The shifting, your dropper post, things like that. Like there's videos out there that go through dropper post etiquette of like, you need to be in this position for this section of trail, this position in that section of trail, up here on that one, down below on that one. Basically, if you want to move your bike, the dropper post, the seat goes all the way down. You want to pedal your bike, the seat's all the way up. You want to go through a little section of rough climbing rock stuff where you're going to need to move around and be able to move into what most people call like a crouch climbing position, but like that sort of hovering over the seat where you can move through it. The seat's going to go down like 1.5 inches. So like the old Specialized command post that had 3 settings, or like the original gravity dropper, the company out of Montana, that was like a pin and a spring. You pull the spring out, and it'll be like pow, and like snap back up really quickly. Like they had like a set setting where there was like, here's as high as it goes, here's as low as it goes, and here's a little bit down. It would be way easier for people if you just had 3 settings, because people are like, it's infinite. That means I have infinite options to be able to set my seat posts, and I need to vary it from all this terrain. So people get super distracted with that. Shifting at least is better now with 1BY drivetrains. Like at least you don't have to worry about, what do I do with this button on the other side? Like I'm so already.
That's true there. That definitely does help a lot.
That's like a good
but we
one.
took away the front derailleur, and then we're like, we'll put a dropper on there now.
We'll put another lever there at least.
We need another lever over there.
Riding on the East Coast is like, I would probably have a 3BY and just have a dropper post. Like I'd never shift if I was out there for like most of it. Like, like Virginia and stuff like that. I'm like, I'd use my dropper more than I would shift. And I see why like those areas, especially like when I rode up in Michigan, was like, oh, I see why 29er rigid single speeds are a thing here, because it would be really fun to just smash as fast as I can around this trail system. And they
don't have a lot of elevation gain and loss there, right?
Yeah, they do up a little bit up in like Copper Harbor and like the north and stuff. There's some dope riding up there, but no, there's not. Like a lot of stuff lower down is like a lake lap, and it's you're pedaling around, and you got like 16 miles in and 200 feet of climbing.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy to think about as a Californian,
Yeah.
It's surprising though what you can do with a little bit of elevation, because I went to Texas a while back and rode that Spider Mountain. That you know what I'm talking about?
I know it. I don't know it great, but I know of it. Yeah.
So it's a lift access place, but they only have like 350 feet elevation loss, and like I'm like, dude, I descend for miles. You know what I mean? Like, and I remember going with like, I was trying to not be like judgmental, you know, but I was definitely judging the shit out of it before I got there. But I had a really good time. And they had like stuff that was difficult for me to ride and stuff that was easy for me to ride. But yeah, I mean, it was a short downhill, but I mean, if you're getting on a lift to get back up, who gives a shit, right? You know?
Yeah, totally. And you get into stuff like that, and it's the builder, you know, that like you can have low vert, but if you have a legit builder that like knows how to put a trail together and how to get people into a flow or connect into, you know, some NAR or work through where you have like a progression into things, like that's a huge amount on the builder. You can ride like a lot of vert and only have 300 feet of really quality trail. You know, like there's a lot of places where I'm like, that trail was cool, but you know, I only really liked 4 rock gardens and those 5 turns. Like I would have been fine riding that section over and over and over and over again. And sweet, right? Yeah. What helped get me stoked on coaching was coming back and having free time and crashing the economy and not really having work and finding stuff that I needed to do. Right. And basically building a bike park at my dad's ranch. I had, you know, his dozer and went out and built my own pump track, built my own set of doubles, built my own dirt jumps below that to a, you know, miniature like 4-cross course. And then I had 300 feet of vertical and I just built like 4 or 5 trails down it. And dude, I was like, mountain biking's awesome. And I had a small palette to work with, but it was so fun.
This is my first year. I've done trail work in the past, but this is the first year that I've built a trail. And it definitely like totally changed a lot of things for me, you know, and there's so many aspects of it that I love now, you know, that I never really thought I would have got into. But man, you really appreciate those guys that can build really well. Because I mean, we did like a rough cut in and we thought like this thing was dialed, and how much that trail changed over the next couple of months of us like, dude, this corner sucks. Or this, you know, because like when you first do it, you're like, dude, you're so stoked. You're like, this is the crappiest trail in the world, but you're like, this is so fun, you know? And then like a month later, you're like, dude, I can't pin this trail. This is boring, you know? Like, and then you start like, oh, I need to make this turn wider, or I need to put in a little something to pop off of here. And, you know, and then all of a sudden you start realizing like how those guys come through and just like nail it on the first try. Like, you're like, wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. And you learn a lot about riding by building a trail of like sections that suck on trails. And you're like, oh, it makes sense because, you know, it's either too short or too long. And like things where you rolled into it and like as you were building it, you're like, oh, this is going to be really, really fun. You get into it and it's like super choppy. And you're like, oh, I see. It's like because this is too short. I find that a lot of times with like trail builders is that I call it like high school kids building trails. Is they get super excited to do it, and then all of a sudden, right where things need to end, they kind of quit and they lose interest in it. You know, like building berms, you'll go into a berm and you're like, yes, this is awesome, and then all of a sudden, like right where you need the support at the bottom of the turn, there's nothing there, and you're like, what happened here? Like, come on, like you don't need to put all the work in the top. Like if you're gonna build a berm, start at the bottom and then quit at the top, because like all I want is to catch at the bottom to hold me to come out of it, and that's a big one. The other one is that the not misconception, but like the loss of like the possibility of the actual momentum you're going to be carrying into it. Like where you walk through it and you're like, this turn is massive. Like this thing's giant. And then you roll through it and you're like, God, that thing's kind of tight. Like you're like, oh my God, we could have gone like at least like 4 or 5 feet wider, you know, like we could have way bigger radius in here. Like I think for me is like trail building wise is like, unless you have a big support berm, the turn needs to be the radius of the speed you want to carry through it. You want to go 20, you got a 20-foot radius. Like it's got to be, you know, and like it's hard.
That's what I really found that we were doing wrong at the beginning of the trail when we were building it was we were making things really tight. And then it was like, yeah, that'd be fine if you were going 5 miles an hour. But like when you want to come down this hill cooking at, you know, 15, 17, 18, 19 miles an hour, like that turn needs to be a lot longer, you know, like, or you're just going to jam your brakes and then you're losing that like flow, you know?
Yeah. That was what I found. Like I worked on the Tamarancho flow trail when that first got built.
Oh yeah, that was super fun, little section too.
Yeah, I was invited to work on that, and I felt like that's sort of similar to the Santa Cruz flow, where you go to like stage 5, which was the first one they built there.
Mm-hmm.
People just got super excited to build something, and then they just stuffed a bunch of stuff in there. And it's like it would have been way more flowy if there was just less through it, and like you could just get into movements and like work through it. And I feel like early flow trails for a lot of people became super frenetic, and like there was just too much going on, and it was like more vibration than actually like flow, where it wasn't like fluid to go through. And yeah,
I think Hoot in Nevada City is built well that way.
Hoot's good. Yeah.
Hoot I personally like Scott's Flat on the other side of the road better. That's just me. I just feel like it's
better because it was sort of an adaptation where they kind of built off of learning experience from Hoot. I think that Hoot in itself was sort of fit that same part where they tried to put more into it, you know, like where they got the opportunity to finally build, and they're like, we're going to build a jump trail the whole way down. And, you know, there's a lot of jumps where it's like, you have to work for it. Like I prefer, if I'm going to go through a flow trail, I shouldn't have to work for stuff. I shouldn't have to pedal to go through. Like, I want to be like, I just want to be able to flow out of it and have like a nice fluid movement into the next one and have that like, I mean, like say Zen again, but like that Zen like flow.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. And that trail definitely has a lot of that where it's like, oh, if you want to hit this double, you better get like 4 cranks in right now, as you came out of that berm, you know,
like when I was down there with Dirt Days, I was with a group of kids that I just wound up like hooking up with. And like, I was like, we're not going to pedal. And like, we're going to coast this whole thing. And it's fun to do that. Is like, that's where I feel is like flow trails should be chainless. You should be able to just roll through everything. And then given the opportunity, if you want to, you should be able to pedal and like make like big shit, like where you could go through and like, instead of doubling out of this one, you could pedal into it and like triple it or like, you know, double quad and like add like it shouldn't be reaching for like a feature. You should be given the opportunity that like, if you can roll through that, there's like big stuff going through. Like that for me is like flow, is like the opportunity to create bunches of options for people where average riders feel like they're Supermen, and then where Supermen feel like gods, you know, like I think
that's funny you said about the float or the not pedal thing. One of my you're familiar with Auburn, like SRI?
Yep.
So like Confluence is like, me and my buddies, we got on this kick where it was like, how fast can we get down that, you know? And we're down at like 5:30 right now, you know, we're freaking killing it, right? So one of my buddies, which you probably know him as well, not buddy, but the guy Dave from Victory Velo, the bike shop there in Auburn.
No, I probably
super nice dude. Yeah, you probably met him somewhere along the line. Anyways, he was telling me, he's like, yeah, dude, me and my friends did the same thing. And he's like, once we got to a certain speed, it was just like, we're gonna kill somebody or ourselves trying to go down this trail faster. And he's like, go to the top and just put your wheel against the gate. And try to get all the way to the life jackets at the bottom without pedaling. And there's some like punchy little, like, they're not climbs, but if you're not pedaling, they're climbs, you know, like.
Totally. So I mean, it teaches so much about conservation of movement, being super efficient with what you're doing. Given the opportunity to pedal, people will waste energy. In a turn, in a movement, going up and over stuff, because they're not afraid of it. Like you look at like Gwen in Leo Gang, whenever it was, when he did the chainless win there, and then Nico Molelli in World Championships where he got second or whatever it was, chainless, where he blew out halfway. Like that's the legit, like being able to ride fast without being able to pedal is like, dude, it moves straight into pumping. That conservation of movement, timing stuff, being efficient with braking, conscious of line choice, like all of these things come through. So when I worked with a high school team, we would do that. We would go through and like ride Tamarancho, and the flow trail was just finished the last year I was there, but we would go through and we'd roll through a section of trail, and I would be like, no pedals. We're not pedaling all the way through this, right? How far can you get? And like kids were stoked when they went through, and then all of a sudden, like 2 weeks later, they made it through the section. They're like, oh my God, I made it this time. I'm like, yeah, awesome. Like, yeah, it's fun. And like, as far as like public trails go, it's a way better sense of like trying to like push yourself. Is because you're not trying to ride as fast as possible. Stravass holding it.
Totally.
You know, you
that's totally what we were doing.
Is you can go through it and it'll give you this like sense of like
the same feeling.
Like I'll ride Jackass and I'll go out and I'll try to beat my time and I'll pedal my ass off and I'll be like, I don't even know. I'll call it a 342, whatever. And I'll pedal my ass off and I'll go through and then I'll coast to the next section and I'll get a 350.
Yeah. You know, like how did I do that?
8 seconds slower without pedaling the whole way, you know,
right.
like whatever. Like, so it's sometimes working harder isn't faster. You know, what's like SEAL mantra is like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Right. So like if you can get into it and get into that movement and like flow through stuff, like that's where stuff comes together. And so like for me, as far as a coach goes, is I'm trying to get people to be aware of movement and trying to get them to functionally recognize what they're doing incorrectly or correctly so that they can get into that flow state sooner. And that's again where you talked about in the beginning as like far as my clientele goes. My clientele are people that understand that education can get them to a point faster, right?
Yeah.
If we were relying on brain surgeons to learn brain surgery as they were growing up, we wouldn't have a great medical system. We're relying on people with experience able to explain it in an environment where people can grow and develop a better skill faster, and then having those people do the same thing. So I expect the next set of coaches that come out after this are even going to be better. Like, I would call myself a second generation coach, learning from Gene, who effectively was one of the first marketed coaches. There was definitely coaches in the day with Ned Overhand and all that stuff in there and Tomac, but they looked at like motorcycles and all those other pieces and then adapted it towards mountain biking. So I'm not advancing the sport as far as creating something new. There's always been coaches and they've always like effectively talked about the same thing. There's different ways for people to explain things. And I think that's the cool thing out there is that you're going to click with somebody and somebody's going to say something. You're going to be like, I got it. That makes sense. Yeah. And so I think that we're at a cool point for my business right now is that the activity is getting recognized and there's more people coming out and trying to do it. And the more people that do it, the better the information is, the more people can learn from it, and the more riders into the sport, new to the sport, or in the sport already can benefit from it. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think kind of just circling back to the no pedal thing too, I think that helps a lot of learning those skills that are like the cornering and the braking and the stuff. Cause that guy was telling me, he said that they'll do it as a race almost together. Yeah. And he said, if there's 3 of them that start at the gate together, you can tell exactly when somebody just tapped their brake, just a little teeny tiny tap. And all of a sudden the other 2 guys are like 30 feet in front of them. And he's like, and it really, really makes you think about all those things. And I think it's a really great progression. But I think one of the reasons I'm mentioning that though is that this takes so much time to learn, you know, like you may do 100 runs on that to learn some better cornering, right? And that 100 runs is like how many times, like you don't do more than 2 in a day if you're pedaling, you know, it's like, that's a big climb, you know? And so when you started out and saying like, this is where people come to like learn something faster, that really resonated with me because I'm a pretty good rider, but I'm also like an idiot for fucking taking 20 years of just like figuring it out on my own, you know, like there definitely.
Let me step in real quick. So a lot of times what happens is with riders like you, where you've spent 20 years riding, a lot of it is, it's not self-validation. It's actual like technique validation where you can look at something and now realize that what you've been doing is actually correct. And then what I can do is I can fix those little pieces that aren't quite like where you have that little misdirection going through with a movement or something going through that, is that you can go back and you can get that to come together. It requires a little bit of work to cheat out that old habit or cut off that old habit, because it's basically hardwired, and that hardwiring needs to be broken down so that it doesn't fire when you're in a fight or flight mode. So your old wiring is always there, and you have to stomp it out and create a new habit. So it takes work going through, but with an experienced rider, at most levels, it's just about validating and getting them to not worry about what they're doing, and then being able to tweak those couple little things and effectively help them to crest that plateau and get to another step where they're getting stuck. And I mean, we all run through plateaus, and that's the part of it. Like, I coach mountain biking. Am I a professional? By far not. Like, I don't have the time. I don't have the strength to do stuff. I joke is that it's like, as far as like a high school reference again, is that like I'll do enough to pass. Yeah. And that's the way I ride a bike, is like I'm not going to put more energy into it than I need to. So I'm not going to like try to be like, oh, cool, let's do a little wheel tap and then like come out this way. I'm like, yeah, I could do that, but meh, whatever. So
seems like too much effort.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I hear you. I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with at where I'm at in skill set, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because I know this is probably, I feel like my biggest problem is cornering, like cornering efficiently, and like especially cornering on something that doesn't have a catch berm or a berm, where it's like a cornering on a flat
safety net.
and like being able to, that's one of those things where I'm always trying to work on, like trying to figure out what I'm doing wrong, or whenever I do finally get that flat corner that's gravelly good, I'm like, what did I do there? And is there anything like, what are your kind of cornering basics? Should we start the timer again?
Let's go another 2 hours from now.
Right.
Cornering basics. There's a lot of room for interpretation with cornering. Effectively, as far as mountain bikers go, we are the largest weight in the system. So comparing it to motorcycles, where people will go through and they'll see this or they'll see that with motorcycles, your body is the largest mass. The biggest thing with cornering is bike body separation, is getting the bike to move away from the body instead of the body moving with the bike. A lot of people will go into a road habit where you'll talk about pointing the knee, dropping the outside foot, and kind of leaning into the corner or kind of standing up. I call that a Captain Morgan turn. So if you picture Captain Morgan standing on the rum barrel, that's a Captain Morgan turn. It's not the best. It works here and there, but it's not the best going through it. Side to side bike body separation. I feel there's a battle with a conversation about foot position, of where people should position their feet in there. The side to side that everybody talks about is obviously leaning the bike away from the body. You should think about your outside hand crossing in front of your chest. If your outside hand doesn't cross in front of your chest, it means you're leaning. And if you're leaning, you're shifting center of mass off of the point of balance as far as reference goes. If you think I
saw Lee likes bikes talk about this before too.
So I'm not going to plug Lee, but he has by far the last video that he put out with Jay of Joy Likes Bikes, or whatever his name is. That's by far one of the best cornering videos out there. I think that's the one I'm talking about. Yeah. I don't like the fact that he says that if you can scallop and work through his scalloping, if you're not on the ground, you can't slide out. I think you're basically pushing, where if you're unweighting and waiting, then you have points that you could slide if you're trying to wait at that point. But he talks about his foot position and that movement going through it. Simon Lawton, the Fluid Ride, talks a little bit about it, about dynamic foot position. The biggest thing to think about is where your weight is. Is it centered over your contact patch? Is foot position creating a force that's not appropriate for what you're trying to do? At a high speed, you can totally drop the outside foot, like super high speed. We're talking about what most riders never reach as far as where you're going through. So you'll see all these pro riders go, drop the outside foot, push the inside hand down, and then lean the bike over into the corner. At that point, yeah, at high speed, super, like we're like high. It gives you the opportunity that you can pull the foot off. So if you ever watch like Carver, does that reference make any sense? Chris Kovarik.
Okay.
Chris Kovarik is known as Carver. You'll see his drifty videos, and he's foot out, flat out, like foot's out in the front, outside pedals all the way down, drifting. It gives you the opportunity to step off the bike. What most people need to think about is maintaining equal pedal pressure. And so think of like scale of liberty. You're sitting there, there's balanced weight on either side. If you're going through that balanced weight, if one shifts, then more weights move into that one side. And what usually happens is people will pull weight to the inside with a foot, and it'll pull them out of balance, and they'll feel like they have to lean or get crooked going through it, and it pulls them inside. If you can weight equally, then you can absorb going through it because the weight's moving up into your body. You're still at what's a level pedal. And I'm totally rambling right now. This is one for me is like, it's really hard to explain and without a visual. Level pedals is another valid one, but what's happening is there's equal weight going through it. So to be honest, you're actually dropping the outside foot, but you're still maintaining a level pedal position, which is super confusing for people. But what's happening is the clocking of the pedal changes because it's moving off of the 3 and 9 o'clock position. And so that's where Simon's comment of like dynamic foot movement of moving up and down is correct, because as you're leaning the bike, the pedal itself winds up staying at the same height because they're changing as you go through it. And then at that point, it equalizes weight in your feet, where that comment earlier about light feet is all your weight should be in your feet. That's what you stand on. Your hands are what's controlling your lean left, your lean right, your forward and back bike body separation, the absorption or rotation around the bottom bracket. And if you aren't balancing your feet, you can't do any of that through a corner. And so what happens is most people get into it, they'll drop the outside foot, they'll push back off the front tire, and they'll unweight the front tire, and then the whole thing will push out away from them. And so if you can keep your feet level, weight still is balanced over the pedal position or over the axle bottom bracket, so that now weight's equally distributed over your front and rear wheel as best as it can be, most likely at a 45% weight on the front and 55% in the rear. And now you can increase forward pressure on the wheel by pushing on your outside hand. If you lean a bike over and you can't put pressure on your outside hand as you lean the bike, your weight's not over the contact. It's inside of the bike or under the bike at that point. And so what I feel is a lot of people that can't get to a high speed, if they drop their outside foot most of the time, they're now creating hand pressure on the inside because you haven't created enough force to push against the body to keep it balanced, because there's not enough speed in the equation. It's basically physics, and I don't really want to go into physics right now, but
I'm good with the physics. We don't need the physics.
Yeah. So if you put pressure on the inside hand and there's not enough weight to hold, or if there's not enough centripetal force to pull the hips out of the corner, you're putting weight under the bike, and it's going to push the front tire out from underneath you. If Gene watches this, I'm sorry, Gene, don't shoot me. But you want to keep equal weight in there so you can create outside hand pressure. Now, that outside hand pressure isn't weight forward. It's actually pressuring down into it. So you're still maintaining natural body weight over your pedal, axle, and bottom bracket, which is equally distributing over front and rear wheel. And now your outside hand pressure is increasing downforce into the front wheel, which is gaining you extra traction over the front. So people will talk about professional racers riding over the front and how they're gambling, rolling the dice with being too far over it. A professional racer isn't gambling with their balance or pressure. They're gambling with the speed that they're riding at. At some point, something's going to give. And if they're going too fast, or if something happens too quick for them to react to, then they get tossed. Any professional racer out there is most likely riding in a really, really, really amazing balanced body position. So,
yeah.
Laurie Greenland, in his like that last win that he did when he talked about revamping his body position, basically found a balanced body position. So cornering for me is one that's sort of abstract. if you have a question, I'd love to answer it with that one, because I know that was kind of a long sort of ramble right there.
I don't have a very direct question because I don't know what I'm doing wrong. You know what I mean? Like I know that I know I'm getting better at it because like I can see it in times. Yeah. And I know that time is either in better braking or in better cornering. Yeah. Because it has nothing to do with me going through a freaking straight rock section where I'm just smashing the shit out of it. Like that I'm not gaining any time there. I know every time I gain time, how well am I carrying my momentum? So that means how well am I braking, right? And then how well am I cornering? Because that's, again, like I'm either carrying that speed through there and then like not being as like physically gassed as I'm going through everything, so I can like keep my heart rate down and my breathing good, and like then that cornering and that braking, it just goes together. And I feel like those runs, like on Confluence, for example, whenever I feel really good, like I know I've just like I pinned the corners, you know, like I got them right, you know, because like you said, I've had runs before where I go up there, like you were talking about Jackass. I will freaking pedal my ass off, man. Put a 34 tooth on my bike so I can just freaking get down, right? And I'll be at the bottom, freaking my heart rate's at like 175, you know, like I'm standing there, right? Yeah, standing there just freaking trying to like not puke. And I will have another run where I'm like, I don't even give a shit about Strava today. And I get down to the bottom, not even freaking breathing, and like get a new PR, you know?
Yeah. And that's part of it too, is that like trying is that's a big one, right? Like doing less, just doing is better. You don't want to try. The more you try to go fast, the harder it is. And like, that's one thing that I talk with my students with is like, you might feel more balanced, you might feel more aggressive, or you might feel the opportunity of being able to do something. Is I want you to just ride smoother. I don't want you to try to ride faster. And if you can ride smoother, you're going to eventually ride faster. There's a certain point, as that pro level of like elite level athletes, where they're just pushing everything. They're at that point of like, it's either going to work or it's not going to work, you know. And you can see that is where they go, and then all of a sudden it's like they just explode, you know. Right. So it's better sometimes to not focus on trying to go faster. It's better to just be like, how like can I work through this? Can I hold it a little longer and connect into that next one? Getting those releases and getting those timings, you know, to come together. Timing and coordination, where the point of exit was to move into that next step. And sometimes if you try to go faster, you wind up anticipating it or trying to move into the next progression quicker, because that's the easiest way to do something faster, right? Is to move to the next step quicker. Yeah. If you're able to, is that, but sometimes you need to allow for that sort of lag or that sort of pause in a movement, so that the next movement after it comes out at a flow point, and you can move into that next state without actually forcing yourself into it and then getting hung up by it, you know? So braking's a big one, braking points, all those things. You think cornering again, the best thing for a lot of people is thinking cornering is making sure that your entry exits are appropriate, right? A lot of people will think faster. Okay, I'll enter into the turn faster, I'll exit out faster. Sometimes you can actually slow down more into a corner and decrease entrance speed and still be able to get higher exit speed going out of it. More so effectively when you're pedaling. It's if you're not pedaling, that entry exit speed is way more dynamic. And like if you can get good brake points and then enter into a corner and have appropriate speed for that corner and allow for the turn to accelerate you through without a panic, then you're gonna be the fastest. And that's like, most pros are thinking about high entrance speed, maintenance of speed, and then maintaining high exit speed. A lot of people will come into a corner and panic because their entrance speed was too high, and then they'll brake check. And then I'll quote Gene on this one. He calls it a downward spiral of shittiness, is that now as soon as you stand the bike up, which loses your lean angle. And then because you lose your lean angle, you lose your cornering radius. And then as you lose your cornering radius, you now need to hit the brakes again because you just stood the bike up. And now you just spiral out of control in that spot. And and wind up losing.
Yeah, I feel like, and that's probably that downward spiral of shittiness is probably something that I end up doing, because as you were explaining that, I was thinking about, there's this one long sweeper at the beginning and it's like kind of gravelly, and that one I always feel like
the left-hander.
Yeah, it's a really kind of right sweep, like right at the very beginning, like as soon as you drop in,
and then it fades into a long left.
Yeah. But that first one is like, it's flat. It's like you're coming in pretty hot because you just dropped in. And what I've noticed is that if I pedal too much there, I end up going so fast that I have to brake way more. And so that's one of those ones where I have to tell myself, like, don't friggin' pedal here, monkey, like, so that I can actually carry a good speed through that corner and then go like so, when I come out of it, then start hammering,
Yeah. It's a mix though, is that what you want to do is at that point, cue off of a break point. So like find something where you give yourself a window and you're going to sprint to that point and then hard brake within 2.5, 3 bike lengths, whatever, chill down to that speed. So that's where your average speed approaching is high enough. And then you can pop off and decrease into that to maintain control, or at least your highest entrance speed to allow for your best exit speed coming out of it, and then go through it. So
I was thinking I either do that or I go out and dig a berm when nobody's paying attention.
The best thing to do is, if you're going to, is you don't make it big, is you just have to know where it is, and you get a small bag of like concrete, and you put just like a 4-inch where you just like get some stones and just fill it in there and put it there. So it's like, it doesn't look like it's much, but it's like catch burn.
There you go. That's what I need.
If you've seen that video that Fabio Widmer did, where he comes through and he berms off of the curb. He comes through and like sets this full like catch berm, and he catch berms off the curb. That's effectively that's what you're doing. But yeah, the things that catch people is break points going through. You want to, like, the faster you're going, you have to be fast in the straight line, and then you have to be able to manage the turn. The old motocross is corners are for dough and straights are for show. Like straights are just like whoops, but then they had like a Red Bull like straight rhythm, and you could see is that people could make up time in a straight rhythm when you're going through it. But like, cornering, if you can corner well, then you don't have to work as hard going through the straights. The people who can't corner well are going to work far harder in the straights to try to gain what they lost in that section beforehand.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that whenever on the runs when I'm gassed at the bottom. But and I mean, obviously to get those times you got to pedal, but I've definitely found that, sometimes when I must not be pedaling that much when I get to the bottom and I'm like barely breathing, or I have like enough energy to get through the flat spot of the Strava run, and like just hammer there, and you can make up, 5 seconds there or 10 seconds there. I don't even know how much seconds, but like, so it's interesting. I was going to ask you, we're getting close here. I was going to ask you, what do you like about doing what you're doing? What's your favorite part of it?
Not having to do anything else.
Yeah, right. That's a good one.
Being able to ride my bike and like have it out there. Like, even though I don't get like a lot of time to actually like go ride, like that's a hard part. But like every day I go out and like I tell people, do drills, do this, do that. Like every time I go out for a coaching session, I effectively get to do drills. And so like I definitely feel more comfortable and confident with stuff. The hardest thing for me is getting into situations and like not having that like drive with like riding with pros and like pushing myself through stuff. That's probably the most challenging, is not feeling like confident to do the things. Like I look back and I'll like get in a situation, I'll be like, God, I don't know about it. And then I'll look back at a video like 5 years ago and it's like me sending it off that jump. And I'm like, and part of it is mainly because it's work now, is that the risk from injury is like so much higher. It's like I can't risk it. And when it wasn't work, when I had other stuff, when I could be like, oh, whatever, I'll just take disability and unemployment. It's like, and now it's like I want to be able to provide. I want to be able to provide for the people that have invested their hard-earned cash for time with me, and I want to make sure I can go through that.
Adulting sucks.
Yeah, life is a way of living, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's definitely. I think that's one of those things where for a long time, I don't think I wanted to get better, and I was totally happy with that. And I think that's an okay place to be as well. Like I still had a lot of fun riding bikes. I just didn't do it any faster and any harder than what I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, and I think this is part of it for me, I separated my shoulder like I don't know how many years ago. Like you know how guys are, we're bad with time. Like if I say 2 years, it was probably 10. If I say 10, it might have been, I don't know. A few years back, I separated my shoulder, and I think that really it changed my way of riding like dramatically because I had a fork failure that made it happen.
Yep.
So I always rode and I was like, dude, I'm confident in my riding. I know where I can keep it on this side of the too far of like pushing my skill set. And that was the first time where it was like, oh, well, something can fail that you're not in control of at all. And you could be fucked, and for a long time that I think kept me from like, I didn't want to have another instance where I couldn't ride my bike for 6 months.
Yep.
Because it's like my therapist, and
Western meditation.
For whatever reason, this last year though, I was finally like, man, you used to hit all this stuff when you were younger, and obviously I'm not going to go into it like I did when I was 20, or 18 or whatever, 15. But come on, dude, you can do this stuff, and like, and I will say. I can't say it's more fun, but maybe it feels that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, when you have the stoke basically creates it. Like it's fun. It is more fun. I had exactly the same thing happen to me. I was riding Auburn coming down and I was going into, what's the DH East? Is it East?
East side?
East side. I was going into the DH on East side, and I was coming off of the upper part of the Forest Hill Loop going through, and there's that sort of road that comes down to the parking lot. Yeah. Because I basically missed the entrance to East side because I went low instead of staying high coming out of it. And I came through that section and separated the lug on my drive side chainstay, and then snapped my non-drive chainstay, and the full bike just swapped underneath me, and I just drove my shoulder into the ground at 28 miles an hour and separated that one.
Yeah, I got one of those good little humps over here too.
Yeah. But yeah, it was like, it wasn't anything I did. It was just full bike failure, like like catastrophic failure. That's it. You're done. And I mean, I jumped back on, went straight to it. I was coaching in 4 weeks in demo. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's hard to jump. It's hard to jump out of crashes like that. My only major injury was a broken jaw that I did in Austin, Nevada. I was out there way back, middle of nowhere, way back DH race they used to have out there, which was super, super sick. But there was this big ass jump at the bottom of it. And at the speeds we were hitting it, it wasn't designed for that. So like how you would pop off of it, you'd have to like squash it. And I was so disappointed that I couldn't, I kept like knuckling it and like not quite feeling like I was getting backside out of it. So I was like, fuck it, I'm just going to let it go a little bit. And I popped it and I woke up with helicopter blades. I was like, oh, cool. Check this out. I'm like, great. And I had fully crushed my full face, gave myself this little dimple on my chin that gives me this little funny. Do you remember the slime advertisement way back in the riding? The slime guy used to have this funny chin. I used to draw it all the time. And I think it's super ironic is I wound up with the same like angular chin that he has. Like,
that's funny.
I drew it forever. Like it was like the one thing I was like, oh, this is so awesome. But I went back and I was riding North Star in a half lid like 4.5 weeks after breaking my jaw. And I was just like, you just got to jump back on it. That's the hardest thing about injuries is that self-doubt is getting shit happens, unfortunately, and you have to be aware of what you're doing. And as you said, is like you understood your limit. You understood where you were. You have to maintain this. You have to maintain a stasis where your rider image and your rider ability need to be matched. If you start riding above your rider ability and you have a higher rider image, you're not going to have a good time. And so that's effectively what I'm trying to do with people, is give them a rider image and a rider ability that can be balanced, and to hopefully allow them to spend less time getting injured, and understanding what's happening if they do run into a crash, and hopefully they're able to react to it smoother, faster, and work through it. So, yeah.
So what's the best way for people to hook up and just go to your website? Do you have like a contact form on there, or just like...
Yeah, there's a contact form. There's a silly little pop-up. Oh, thank you for visiting. Sign up to emailer. Phone calls, emails, addresses are on there. They all come through. Facebook, Instagram, whichever.
Right on.
I'm not a YouTuber, so like I've gone through and checked my YouTube videos. I'm like, oh, that comment should have been responded to 2.5 weeks ago. So as my business is coaching, I don't spend a lot of time in those. But yeah, email's the best. Singletrackmind.com for more information. Dylan at a Singletrack Mind, Amy at a Singletrack Mind. That's my wife, and thankfully I have somebody that can manage for me, and I appreciate her, and I appreciate her being a mother to my great family.
All right, happy Father's Day, dude.
Happy Father's Day, exactly.
Yeah. Thanks for spending your time out here with me, drinking beers in the garage, right?
It's what I would do anyways, and it's like the one day that I actually get like, I can actually like do it without having somebody be like, "Is that all you're gonna do today?" And it's like, come on, it's Father's Day. What the fuck else am I gonna do?
Right? That's what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. And it was awesome to be able to spend time with you. And yeah, dude, I'd love to someday check out your trail, give you input, or say, high five, that's awesome. And
believe me, dude, if you want to come down this way, let me know. I'll head up with you. I rode there today though. Yeah. And it is freaking hot as balls down here right now. It is not a good idea.
Yeah.
So if you're busy until like November when it starts raining, that'd probably be great.
Yeah. Perfect. I joke is that it's called swalls.
Yeah.
Swalls. Sweaty balls is swalls. It's swalls hot.
It's definitely swalls hot. Yeah. It is rough today. It was one of those days where you're like, why am I even out here? Like, really? Like I should have drank more last night. So I was like so hungover I wouldn't go out today.
Yeah. It's one of those where it's either you gotta dark 30 and like jump out and like throw the lights on for the pedal approach and then come back. I was out in Fallon, Nevada on Friday doing a photo shoot for Great Basin Brewery, and we wrapped up at 8:00, and I got in my car and it was 86 degrees, dude.
Oh wow.
Like we started at 5:30. I left at 8:00, and it was literally 86 degrees at that point in time. It was just like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine what it was going to be after that. Like I grew up in the foothills, and like heat doesn't really bother me. I'm like, yeah, this is uncomfortable. More for me is like, I know that other people can't deal with it. I'm like, ooh, this is probably bad. And I forget that sometimes. And it's like trying to manage people while you're coaching is like, just because you're happy doesn't mean they're happy.
Yeah. I'm not too bad with heat. I'm more of a, like, I'm horrible at being cold. Like I turn into like 100% bitch as soon as I get cold. Heat, I'm not too bad with, as long as I have water though. That's the thing is like, if I run out of water in the middle of a ride, I lose my shit. I start like the anxiety monster just comes in with like a whole freaking boatload of whatever he does, you know? It's just,
throws it down heavy.
Yeah. So, do you watch YouTube much? Like
I do. Yeah.
So I always ask people at the end of the show, and it doesn't matter if it's like mountain bike related or not. I always ask people what they watch on YouTube because it's interesting to find new channels. And so is there, what are you into?
Ridiculousness. Yeah.
Oh, I think don't they have a show, a TV show though?
It's a TV show. Rob Deerdick and
I've seen that TV show.
Green. Yeah.
So they have a YouTube channel too?
They just put all their videos on YouTube. Whatever.
Okay, I'll have to check it out.
I'll spend so much time watching that. Yeah. I mean, I'll go through it. Like as a coach, I basically watch every other coach's videos as I go through. So I'll watch X rider X, but I'll watch Joy Bike. I'll watch Phil Komet's Skills with Phil. I'll watch Burn Pete. I'll watch Kyle and April. Through.
Kyle's really good. I like him a lot.
Yeah. I mean, like it's cool. He's not a coach. I'm gonna say like he's a really good rider, and like his understanding of it works, but he's a pro, and like the shit that he can do is a lot of it is just that training. He's good. I think it's funny is that for me, a lot of the clientele will see that and they'll be like, oh my God, it's so amazing. I'm like, April is an actor. That, like, she's
like, I had them on the show too, and a lot of people don't know she was like a moto person, like doing like huge crazy jumps on a motorcycle. It's not like she's going out there and doing this road gap and she never rode fucking mountain bike before, you know, like
she hasn't ridden mountain bikes, and I get it. Like there are differences, but there's like, if you have the muscle coordination to be able to ride a motorcycle, like, but I love it. I love it because people are stoked and they go.
No, they're killing it. They're definitely killing it.
Yeah. My other favorite is this lady from Mallorca named Roxy. She's an IMBA instructor, ICP 3. I should have said earlier, but like I have a level 3. There's only like 35 people in the world that have a level 3. She's one of their instructors. She's super good for female riders. Like she's not intimidating. She just breaks it down. She just talks about how it is. And
what's the name of her?
Roxy Ride and Inspire.
Roxy Ride and Inspire. I'll have to tell the lady. Because she says to me, you know, sometimes somebody can be a really good coach, but they just don't speak in the language that you hear.
Yeah.
So it's good to like listen to different people, because sometimes somebody will explain something in a way, like you said earlier, where it just clicks to you. Yeah. You know, and maybe the one guy explains it, you know, way A and you use way C, and way C is the only way that person gets it. And you guys are all saying the same thing. But yeah.
I think it's funny is that mountain biking, I joke, is that mountain biking is one of those sports where there's always a never, but there's never an always. Wait, let me see if I said that right. There's never an always, but there's always a never. So you can't always do one thing to have it correct, but there's one thing that definitely you cannot do in situations. And that's the hardest part, is that there's so many variables. Like you were talking about earlier, it's like there's like 75 things that you're trying to get through. And that's the problem, is that like you can have somebody say something, as long as you're moving through correctly, it works. And like, as far as my instruction goes, is I try to get people to understand what the movement is and understand where the balance is. And as long as you can create it in a similar pattern or a similar path, that you're along the right lines. My effective thing is that if somebody's telling you to move out of balance, it's probably wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest. But like, yeah, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right on, dude. Well, dude, it's been awesome sitting out here chatting with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. And hopefully any of you guys that have been listening on the podcast or watching on YouTube, go check out his website, A Singletrack Mind. He also has an Instagram and a Facebook and a Twitter and a YouTube channel. But I don't think you have a whole lot up there on the YouTube channel, though, right?
No. I had a video in 2009 that had 21,000 views on it.
There you go. So still riding that video from 2009. But if you want to see the current stuff, definitely his Instagram account is active. I was over there checking that out. Good stuff over there. And a lot of stuff going on. If you're a Northern California person, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's like a calendar listing on there. It shows all the different classes that he has coming up, or clinics. I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong vernacular again. So anyways, Dylan, dude, it was great chatting with you. All you guys out there, I want you guys to remember one thing. If that's the only thing that you get out of this, it only takes a bike to be a biker. So get out and be one.